Hey, this is Adam from Hamilton County Soil and Water Conservation District. And today we're going to be talking about harvesting and storage of live stakes or dormant tree cuttings. In a separate video, we address proper methods for installation of live stakes into eroding stream banks. And you can find a link to that video in the description below. So what is a live stake? A live stake is a dormant cutting of a tree. So a tree branch that you cut off and you install it, and under proper circumstances, it will then develop into an individual tree. And so why would we want to install live stakes? Well, live stakes are particularly well suited for installing into eroding stream banks to stabilize the streams. So in this area at least, a stream bank has to have woody vegetation rooted in it to be stable. But in an unstable or eroding stream bank, you don't necessarily want to go digging in the stream bank to plant a tree, right? That could cause more problems. So an uninvasive way of getting woody vegetation rooted in the stream bank is to install live stakes. And again, see the link in the description below for a video on installing live stakes. There are several other benefits of installing live stakes in stream banks as well, such as habitat creation, creating shade to cool down the temperature of the water, uptake of some of the most ubiquitous pollutants in our streams like sediment and nutrients, as well as uptake of air pollutants such as CO2. So because these cuttings are dormant, that means we have to harvest them when the trees are dormant in the winter months. So the time that this is typically done is at the end of the winter when we get closer to a time when we can install them. Now, not all species of trees are going to take to live staking as well. The survivorship of some species will be much lower than others. So which species are the best? Another consideration on this is when you're harvesting in the winter, sometimes identification of tree species is difficult. So what we like to do is pick our harvesting locations in areas where all the species are going to be successful and appropriate. And so a great location to target for harvesting are sand and gravel bars, right? Pretty much any species that survives out there in those erosional conditions are going to have great root systems for holding the stream bank together, and they're going to have relatively good survivorship. So let's go out to this gravel bar and take a look at some methods for harvesting live stakes. Once we find an appropriate plant to cut from, we got to start thinking about where to make our cuts and what sizes of live stakes do we want to get. So first, the width, right? These things need to be installed as deep as possible into the soil, and that can be challenging to get it in. So you're going to need to make a pilot hole. And so the thickness of the cutting probably needs to conform to the type of pilot hole driver you use. A common tool to use is just a standard piece of rebar. And so as you can see, this was cut to conform to that. You want it to be a little bit thicker than your pilot hole because it needs to fit real tight into the bank. If you have access to a concrete form stake, these are a little bit thicker. The general rule is the thicker the live stake, the better the survivorship, the more energy there is for the live stake to take from its reserves to grow. So thicker better, but think about how you're going to get it into the ground. As far as length, you need to get this thing into moist soil, right? And so if you're really low on the bank, which is perhaps one of the most important places to concentrate your installation, it's going to be a lot wetter down there. And so you're not going to necessarily need it to be as long. The higher up you go, the drier the soils are going to be and the deeper you're going to have to get these things installed. So, when you get it into the ground, you can always cut some off the top. So err on the side of a longer live stake. Another consideration when you're thinking about where to cut and how long to cut is where the buds are at, right? So the buds are located just under each branching point, and when you install this into wet soil, the buds that are underground are going to grow into roots, and the buds that are dry and above ground are going to grow into shoot materials. So it's really important to get as many buds into moist soil as possible. Now, different species are going to have buds that are spaced out in different ways. So you want to, one, cut really close to a bud section so that can go as deep as possible, but also cut it at a length where you're going to get at least 2 sets or more of buds down deep, and at least have a couple sets that are going to be above ground as well. When you install your live stake, it's going to be really important that you install it right side up. So an easy way to keep track of that when you're cutting a lot of different material is to cut the bottom at a 45-degree angle, and then to cut the top perpendicular to the stem, so that you can quickly identify which side is up. It's also helpful to cut it at a 45-degree angle on the bottom, just to help to get it into the ground a bit easier. You also want to make sure to prune off all the side branches as well, but make sure you don't cut them off too close to the main stem and cause damage to the live stake. Well, it's best to install live stakes as soon as they're harvested. Sometimes due to weather and high flows and streams, it's not practical. So you can store these under the right circumstances until you're ready to install them. So it's important to keep your live stakes moist, but we don't want to soak them. And that's important to understand that before you install these after they've been stored, you're going to soak them for a day to up to even 10 days to wake it up before that happens. So you don't want to prime it prematurely. You want to keep them in a cool, dark place, preferably between 34 and 38 degrees. You might just be able to find a cellar or something that's going to stay dark. But if you're putting them in a cooler with lights on or something, you might want to consider covering them up with a tarp or a dark colored garbage bag. And remember to check out our next video on methods of installing live stakes into eroding stream banks. It's linked in the description below.